What's up, fellow artistes? It's Boots. Today I'm going to be explaining my take on the painting process. This is my first voiceover video on this channel. Last year for Christmas I got a nice mic. This year on Christmas I'll be using it for the first time ever. That's how much of a procrastinator I am. I would like to clarify some things for this video. One, this is how I paint, so when I use language like, oh, you're gonna want to do this, this, and that, I obviously don't mean that's the way you should need to go about art. It's just me giving instructions on how to paint like me, you know, in the event you would, for whatever God-given reason, want to do that. Two, in this tutorial, I guess you could call it, it is intended for Paint Tool SCI users and people who generally have a grasp on that program. I'm not going to get into the details of how to use its features and moving on. Now, I saw this tweet here. I thought it was pretty funny, but I found myself unable to relate because if this meme were by me, it'd go something like this. No layers, none. That's a little bit of a lie, but for the most part, we're just working on one layer because out of this 13 to 14 hour painting, 2 to 3 hours were dedicated to sketching on one layer, a little under 3 hours for getting down the flats on a different layer, so that's 3 hours spent with 2 layers, and the majority of the time, about 8 or so hours, spent shading and perfecting everything on one layer again.
A mirror right in front of me, that's where I found. I never take glass, reflecting that's a truth. It's telling what's not to be told. I need that mask. I'm a sharpshooter at this masquerade, heart in both face and mind.
By the way, what I am painting today is my Secret Santa submission for my dearest friend Ebu. This is her ass clown Cecil, hiding in a mega present with a bunch of super Danganronpa 2 and Jabberwock Isle Easter eggs floating around him. Jabberwock Isle is my SDR2 themed roleplay group if you like making friends and committing murder. And also roleplaying, do check it out. Back to the process. I unfortunately didn't record the sketching process, which is one of the most interesting parts of watching a speed paint. My apologies, my condolences, go aside, but that's all there is to that step. First, you start by sketching out the entire image on one layer, and then when you're done, you determine the background color or what color you want everything to harmonize with. So if the color's blue, which in this case it is, everything you color is going to automatically have a bit of blue in it. Now, what you're seeing here is that process. The flatting process involves using the marker tool to color in everything on that solid color, not above. This is how everything blends in with blue. Because the marker tool is not opaque, it blends in with whatever color is currently on the canvas. So again, that's 2 layers. One is the sketch, line art, whatever you want to call it, and the other is the color including the background. Here are my brush settings for marker, by the way. I choose marker tool over an opaque pen tool for 2 reasons. One, like I said, it ties all the colors together with that one background color so they all have blue in common. And 2, the marker tool gives everything these imperfections, this texture, if you will. Now, during the quote-unquote flatting process, you are going to do some shading. Because my line art is a deep blue color, not black, I do not personally recommend shading anything with black. I do tend to use that deep blue color for shading in a lot of things. You'll see that I use that to shade in Cecil's pants and soon his jacket. Those two in particular because they are both cool tone colors.
What else should I be? Please don't take off my mask, revealing dark.
You may be wondering, but Boots, if there are no layers, then how do you shade within any given object? I hear you. Once you cross over into the opposite evil of 10 million layer land, you adapt to no layer land, and you find that it's relatively easy. Without layers, you simply select the region you want to work with using the Magic Wand tool. Yes, the Magic Wand tool. With it, you can select regions based on what you have the detection mode set to. On our color layer, you can use the color difference option to select things based on their, you guessed it, color. If, for example, you intend to paint within a red region against a sea of blue, you'll have a pretty easy time selecting that red color. If you want to select a medium purple against a dark purple, you might have a harder time, so play around with that slider there. That's the tolerance. It picks up more or less of the same color depending on, where you slide it to. While that is my preferred option of selection, you can always use one of the transparency modes on your line art layer. So what you do with the Magic Wand tool is you would go to the line art layer, hide your color layer so you can see better, and apply the Magic Wand tool inside the enclosed region of your choice. Then of course you go back down to your coloring layer and hide it and start coloring within that region. That method really came in handy for this piece because there were a lot of thick edged boxes in this image, so I didn't have too hard of a time just clicking inside a present and the Magic Wand tool doing the rest.
Hiding both face and mind, are free for you to draw. I'm a shapeshifter, have no face to show. Please don't take off my mask, my disguise.
Alright, so you're done with this sketch and the flats. What next? Now is the time for the hardest part. You merge that sketch, line art, fucking thing onto the colors. And thus begins the 8-hour journey working with one layer. Yes, you are going to make mistakes. If you don't like the anatomy on something, you do have to get crafty figuring out how to fix it. And honestly, that's like the funnest fucking part for me. You either saw or you're about to see me fix Cecil's eye. That's done by selecting the entire area around his eye, copying it, pasting it onto a new layer, then Frankensteining it with free deform before erasing the areas around it and slapping it back onto the original layer. If this method is a really foreign concept to you, like it was to me about 2 or 3 years ago, think of it like this. Imagine you post a piece of art online with a big fucking watermark on it. Then later in life, you want to use that piece of art, but it's got your ugly old logo on it, and you don't have the original file. What do? That situation legit sounds like a fun game to me because I'd go ahead and boot up Signs, start painting over that motherfucker. And that's almost exactly what it is, you don't have the original layers anymore. So you have to make do and start coloring on top of the image as well as on it directly. Playing a bit of Photoshop surgeon, if you will.
Moments of calm, nothing left to be found. A mirror right in front of me, that's where I found an empty glass, reflecting that's a truth. It's telling worse than
What tips do I have, if any? I've got a few. Don't worry too much about perfecting the line art sketch thing. If you do perfect it, you'll be cutting your future self some slack. But if you don't, forget about it. You can fix it during the shading stage. Typically, if I'm trying to do a big bad painting, such as with this one, I usually do render the hell out of the focal point sketch. The focal point sketch. It's pretty apparent with this project, if you noticed. Cecil's sketch was cleaned up and the objects around him were still a mess. But if I'm just trying to churn something out, the whole sketch will be a mess, honestly. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. As I said, the cleanup process is admittedly pretty fun for me anyway. That was 1. 2, use paint tool size, brightness, and contrast filters. And Photoshop the shit out of that shit if you can, because I use the marker tool with those settings on a solid background to color and shade everything. While it gives everything a blue tint, it does make everything seem a little washed out. Which looks good for standalone sketches, like ones that I just, yeet onto Twitter. But for fully fleshed out paintings, you definitely want more contrast in your piece. So play around with brightness and contrast, and even the color deepen slider. And last but not least, 3, honestly, just do whatever the hell you want. After all, this method of mine was birthed out of sheer laziness. I mean, I hated doing line art, dude. Not because it was monotonous, but because... I mean that too, but because I thought that my sketches, while messy, they perfectly captured what I had originally intended for the drawing, especially expression-wise, so I thought that line art completely defeated my initial vision. So after that, my compromise was to just clean up my sketches and call that line art. But that also didn't satisfy me because I was left feeling really lazy and having produced something that looked half-assed, even though the time it took me to clean up the sketch was on par with the time it took me to do line art. And that's when I finally realized that, slapping everything together and touching it up to perfection on one layer was, that was my calling. But for real, I've been trying to hone my hand at art for like 10 or so years now. It wasn't until about 3 years ago that I finally found something that I'm really comfortable with.
Where have I been? I'm a sharpshooter at this masquerade, hiding both face and mind, all free for you to draw. I'm a sharpshooter. What else should I be? Please don't take off my mask, revealing dawn.
And that's gonna be it for this video. I hope it was a good first shot on my part. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you learned something new. If you like my art, you can follow me on any of the 3 social medias I will link in the description and display momentarily. I have a DeviantArt, a Twitter, and an Insta. Thanks guys. Adios. Muchachos.
Moments of calm, nothing left to be found. A mirror right in front of me, that's where I found an empty glass, reflecting not to be